Hello, everyone. This is Taylor, and this is another episode of the Happy Doc. I actually haven't done too many episodes recently, and I was really excited to get started back up again with some of this content. If you have not listened to the show before, the Happy Doc started as this idea of me being a medical student, and I wasn't very excited about my future as a physician. Now, this whole process has definitely evolved in a lot of ways. And so I'm really excited to share with you not just guests that I have on in every episode, but I really want to dig into the concept of fulfillment, the concept of happiness, going through different philosophical ideas, discussing life. And the real goal of the Happy Doc and the show is to inspire each and every one of us to think a little bit differently, to maybe gain a new perspective, to try to look at things in a different way so that we can really enjoy the experience of life. So I am always passionate about talking about this stuff, and that's why we have this show today. But before we get to the episode content for today, I'm going to toss up our intro video. So I love that clip. So for today, I want to talk about something that I think is really interesting. And I really do want to dig into more of these concepts as I go through this podcast further. But I really want to talk about this concept of a dilemma. And I want to go a little bit deeper into the dilemma between the two things that we're going to talk about: freedom versus restraint. So a dilemma, obviously, if you don't know, is when you're stuck kind of in between two sort of poles of an idea, and you have to make a decision based on a difficult set of circumstances, generally between maybe one path versus the other. So in this kind of idea I'm going to propose today, there's a dichotomy between freedom versus restraint. So in life, we have this part of us that always wants to be free. We want to reach out. We want to go and do whatever it is that our heart desires. You know, you hear that concept of the free spirit. We want to go and travel. We want to go and dance on the street. We want to go and like be an artist. You want to go create millions and millions of projects. So that's kind of like that idea of being this sort of free spirit, right? And then on the flip side, there's this idea of being a human and also needing to restrain yourself. You have to sort of keep a low profile. You have to, lower yourself, humble yourself, limit the amount of expression that you have for yourself, limit your ability to do certain things that you want to do, right? So this idea of like restraining and limiting maybe what you do in your life, right? So as we all know, as humans, we can't be completely free. And obviously it would not be fun if we restrained ourselves constantly. So that's why I really want to talk about this idea of the dilemma. And the reason I'm bringing it up for today's episode on the Happy Doc is because we are currently in a pandemic, right? We have the COVID-19 pandemic. We're all experiencing this right now. And so what we're facing as a collective whole, if we think about what happened and scaled up since March, right? The pandemic has really put us in this difficult dilemma between our ability to be free versus our ability to or need to restrain ourselves, right? So in this current situation in life right now, a lot of us hate being stuck home. A lot of us hate the idea that we can't do what we used to do. We can't be in crowds. We can't go and travel. And it's incredibly painful right now. And I see this sort of issue of freedom versus restraint being one of the greatest dilemmas that we're facing when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I actually posted this image. There was this influencer, social media influencers. His name is Jesse Elder. And for Thanksgiving, he decided to have a bunch of friends over, it looks like, in his house. He had like 50 people, if not more, in this photo gathered together, people of different families, different ages, without masks. And I get it. There's this sort of feeling that we don't want to really restrain ourselves. So this is kind of the expression of freedom, right? This idea that even though this pandemic's happening, screw everyone. This isn't real. I'm healthy. We're healthy. We can get through this. We're going to be completely free, right? And so this is this idea of being completely free, going full out there. And this individual is expressing their personal freedom to want to essentially share a Thanksgiving meal in a time where I think we have global sort of restraint given the pandemic. Now, my job, and I do a lot of work in psychology and in psychiatry, and one of the definitions I like to work with is psychologists and psychiatry. We're trying to defend reality. We're trying to look at the truth. We're trying to look at evidence, and we want to bring people back to sort of reality. So the reality is that we have a pandemic. We have a lot of individuals getting infected. We're at a huge spike right now, especially in the United States. And so we all need to practice restraint. But obviously, when we're restraining so much, it's encroaching on our personal freedoms. And I totally get the idea that when we have to restrain ourselves, stay home, wear masks, be socially distant, don't do this, don't do that, don't travel, don't go out to restaurants, don't have multiple family members with you. That has a lot of restraint. That's so much restraint, and it's incredibly uncomfortable, but yet it's absolutely important. So what's happening when I kind of take a look at this bigger picture right now is we as human beings have this desire to be free, and especially in the United States, if we look at the spectrum between restraining versus being free, United States and the people here, we're always taught about the American dream, going out and doing big things, building out something incredible, building out your ideas, doing all of these things that build out your freedom, and yet we're stuck and restrained. So I completely understand it psychologically, how it can be very hard to restrain ourselves. And yet it's absolutely important that we do restrain ourselves, because the reality is if we can restrain ourselves now, we will be able to get back to freedom. So I really wanted to kind of take a look at this from the lens of the COVID-19 pandemic, because that's something that if we don't take a look at our own personal beliefs between restraining ourselves, containing ourselves, limiting what we can do versus our freedom, we're going to have a tough time. And I think that this is a really important conversation for us to discuss the difference between what we believe in regards to our idea around restraint versus our idea around freedom. I'm going to build this out a little bit for this conversation because I want to talk about becoming a professional. Whether you're a professional as a physician, whether you're a professional in your business, whether you're a professional, house dad or mom, or your stay-at-home dad or mom, whatever you want to be good at, it's going to require you to do a little bit of work, right? It's going to require you to do a little bit of study. It's going to require you to limit your time with certain things, right? So if you think about Michael Jordan, did Michael Jordan go out and party all the time? Did Michael Jordan, do things that would have been easy for him as a person just to go and do? No, he really focused on his craft. He focused on the sport. He practiced all the time, right? He went and did his free throw shots. Kobe Bryant, I heard, practiced 3 times in a day. He would literally get up at like 4 a.m, go and practice, come back, take a shower, relax, come back and practice again in the morning, like later in the morning, then come back and then practice again in the evening. He practiced 3 times. Do you think that this guy had to practice an incredible amount of restraint? Absolutely. By limiting the restraint, he gained the freedom or the ability to be a pro in his field, which ultimately opened up doors for him and increased his freedom. So sometimes by restraining ourselves, we increase our freedom in the long run. And the reason I'm giving this example is because as a society right now, we need to restrain ourselves. We need to limit the exposure, limit the infection, limit the amount of things we're doing outside. So long term, we're able to get back our freedom. The problem is right now is by individuals choosing to express their freedom now when it's not appropriate, we're ultimately hurting our collective freedom down the line, downstream. So it's important that we get why restraint and freedom are actually not the opposites. Sometimes by restraining ourselves or doing the difficult things in the short term, we're going to get long-term freedom benefits, right? So If I think about this when it comes to financial freedom, right? A lot of people who are financially wealthy, they actually have to restrain themselves in the short term to get long-term wins. So let me explain that, right? So if I have $1,000, right, I could put that money towards a new car, and then maybe I get another $1,000, another $1,000. Suddenly I get, 15, 20K, and I'm going to put that towards a new car. I could put that money towards a new car, or I could incrementally put that towards an investment that's going to grow in the long term. And maybe that 15 or 20K that I collected is going to become 40K or 60K or 80K. So you restrain what you're purchasing now, so you increase your wealth over the long term, right? You restrain yourself in the short term to gain long-term freedom. Now, these two poles, it's not like you restrain yourself in the short term and you completely are so restrained, you're never going to have freedom, right? You're never going to be able to build out the life you want. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there is a balance between the restraints that we put on ourselves and the freedom that we can have as well. So when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic, and again, I'm bringing this topic up because I think it's so important when it comes to the pandemic that we're facing. We really need to take a look at how much we're restraining ourselves right now versus how much freedom that we're practicing, so to speak. If for me, as an example, I'm a health professional, right? I'm around patients all the time. I'm in and out of the hospital. So for me, I have to practice a lot of restraint because I'm being absolutely exposed to people all the time. If you're going out, and hanging out with multiple family members, meeting with different people that you don't know what they're doing, right? If you're traveling right now, all of this time, you just got to ask yourself, like, are you maybe not practicing restraint, right? When it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic, are you not restraining yourself enough to realize that long-term that's going to impact positively and we're going to have more freedom, right? Now, maybe it's the flip side. Maybe you're so holed up into your home that you've never left the house. You haven't gone for a walk. You haven't gone and got some groceries, or, maybe you're too concerned. You're too protective to the point that you're not able to be free. So I'm not saying it's one or the other. What I'm saying is there's a balance between our restraint right now and freedom. And right now we do with the COVID-19 pandemic. The reality is we're going to need to collectively practice restraint. Now, the vaccines are coming out. We've heard of this. We know that there's different companies that are doing a great job. AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, like all these companies are doing a really great job putting out the new vaccines, right? But we still need to practice restraint. So if we're not taking things seriously, right, that's going to harm our collective freedom. And that's absolutely what I want to talk about in this episode. When it comes to happiness, the happy doc, right? To be fulfilled, to be excited, this whole concept, it's about understanding balance. I really do believe that. And there's dichotomies all over the place. I'd love to kind of dig into these different dichotomies. I think they're very important. But this separation between freedom and restraint, this plays out all the time in different stories and in different actions that people take on a daily basis. I'm absolutely passionate about becoming a professional, being successful, building out your happy life, building out a life that you're going to be super, super excited about. And that's going to come to this. It's gonna be impacted by our ability to restrain ourselves, sometimes constrain ourselves, versus practicing our freedom. I'll give you a simple example, right? Myself as a gymnast, when I was going through my gymnastics training, and if you guys didn't know, I practiced Division I gymnastics, and I participated in the NCAA championships. I had to choose times where, I didn't go out and party. I didn't go out with my friends on the weekends. I didn't drink alcohol, right? I had to eat a nutritious diet. I had to restrain myself from doing certain things that were ultimately going to hurt my body, right? So I had to choose times to restrain myself. On the other hand, I had to also choose times to have fun, to let loose, to hang out with my friends, to do all of those things. So this balance is absolutely important. And it's not one or the other. It's just finding that point that's going to be the appropriate point. And right now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we absolutely do need to restrain ourselves. So I'm going to leave this whole section up, for anyone who's listening and anyone who's watching, just like additional thoughts, questions. This is a live stream, but if anyone wants to comment on this video afterwards, I don't have an answer for what is the appropriate amount of personal restraint versus personal freedom. Like what is the right line to practice? You're restraining yourself versus being free. I don't know the answer, and I don't think there is a right answer. That's why it's a sort of concept or a dilemma, right? We have to make a decision, but we do have to make those choices. And then the other idea that I kind of wanted to share in this is on a collective whole, right? I talked about personal, but from a societal whole, how is the United States going to represent our ability to restrain ourselves so that we can have long-term freedom? Or are we as a society, if we look at America, are we going to practice the American freedom in the American way and not restrain ourselves and ultimately hurt ourselves in the long term, right? Because the one thing is, if you're being completely free, if you're going out there, if you're going to go wild and crazy and you're going to practice your freedom, that is ultimately going to damage our ability to be really good or protect ourselves from things like the COVID pandemic, practicing restraint so that we can be more successful long-term as a society. So we really have to take a look at these things. And I think it's absolutely important to think about that. So those are some of my thoughts on freedom versus restraint. This is not like a end-all be-all sort of thing. This is a conversation. And there's many other sort of dichotomies I kind of want to dig into that I think are really important. So those are my thoughts. I want to appreciate you guys for watching, for listening. I'm going to post this on the Happy Doc podcast. I want to thank you for being here today. And I hope you had a great Thanksgiving weekend. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Happy Doc. Take care.